The heavens, once untainted by shadow, had grown heavy with dread. The air lay still as though the cosmos itself had forgotten to breathe. Far beneath, the gods stood vigilant at their posts. At the rim of Marduk's shield, light trembled like a dying flame. The storm had not yet broken, yet all creation felt its rise. In the abyss she had risen, vast and unending, her form coiled through the void like a serpent of eternity. From her gaze poured the smolder of suns, molten and merciless. Behind her stretched the legions of uncreation, an endless horizon of doom awaiting release. She was the primeval storm, the queen of terror, the first mother of abominations. Darkness veiled her, wrath enthroned her, and with eyes colder than fate, she measured the ramparts of the divine.
Light, storm, stone. They believe in barriers, but creation is a cage, and I am its end.
Tiamat turned her gaze upon the war council of ruin. Uthrog loomed above them all, a colossus of stone and sinew. Drakara stood with wings furled, his burning eyes smoldering like coals of the abyss. Gorgon drew breath in the shadows, his frame quivering with wrath barely contained. Ishtar shone among them, radiant yet fallen, a star torn from the heavens. And Enlil lingered apart, cloaked in storm, his silence trembling with thunder.
The time has come. Marduk has cloaked his realm in divine pride. 6 layers of fear. But we are chaos, and there is no wall we cannot undo.
We will break the light. The gods will see darkness once more. Let the sky scream. The storm will be ours.
We will infect their sacred ground until it rise with our rage.
Even the dead will choose chaos when we make them remember who they were.
And when all else falls, we bring the storm to their throne.
Tiamat lifted her vast coils toward the heavens, and the void itself shuddered. Around her, shadows throbbed and spread, unfurling like wings of smoke across eternity.
Today, we begin again. We break the world, and when the divine are dust, chaos will be king.
The horde of chaos stirred at last. Giants thundered upon the earth. Dragons ascended, their wings tearing the firmament. Beasts shrieked, their cries rending the night. The vault of heaven split as Enlil summoned the first roar of thunder. At the vanguard moved Tiamat, the storm incarnate, for patience had perished and silence was undone. From afar answered a flare of sacred fire, Shamash's shield blazing in defiance, a sun rising against the tide of ruin. At the brink of eternity, order and chaos took their first steps toward war. A dome of blinding radiance encircled the divine realm, burning like a solitary star upon the blackened sea of creation. Against it surged the storm, and lo, the silence was shattered by the thunder of footsteps that heralded the dawn of strife. The first blow struck as though the very fabric of the cosmos had been torn asunder. The shield of light, the proud bulwark of the gods, met its destined reckoning.
Let their holy fire blind me. I'll walk through it and burn their heaven down.
He charged forth, and behind him the giants roared in dreadful chorus. Their blows fell like the descent of meteors, and the firmament trembled. Cracks spread wide, and the shield itself screamed as though it bore the agony of the heavens.
Light is fragile, and everything fragile breaks.
The final blow descended, and the dome was shattered. Radiance imploded into silence, and the sky itself bled as though the veins of creation had been torn open. A hurricane had encircled the realm, spiraling with divine wrath, lightning forked, and the wind screamed. Upon its edge hovered Drakara. The second wall had been rage transfigured into sky, a storm summoned by the gods to break the tide of chaos. Yet chaos remembered the storm, for chaos had been born within it.
We do not fight it, we become it.
He dove, and his wings cleaved the lightning. Fire and storm had merged as one, and the dragons bent the tempest to their will. The storm howled, yet now it screamed against the gods themselves.
They forged it as a barrier. We will wield it as a blade.
The storm crashed inwards, smiting the divine city with unbridled fury. Towers split asunder, and even the mountains swayed beneath its wrath. The third wall had been the world itself, stone and soil risen in solemn protest. Yet even the world, vast and ancient, succumbed to decay.
They think stone is forever. Let's show them how fast forever crumbles.
The monsters had burrowed deep and exhaled pestilence. The ground writhed, mountains toppled, craters yawned wide. The earth itself had risen in betrayal against the gods.
They built a kingdom on sacred ground. Let it bury them.
The fourth wall had risen, woven of wailing shades, summoned forth by Ereshkigal and Nanshi. From the mist, Ishtar emerged, her arms outstretched as though to embrace both doom and divinity.
You've served the gods long enough. Now serve yourselves through me.
The spirits broke their ranks, and their cries were transfigured, no longer wails of agony, but the thunder of vengeance. They surged forth like a tide of phantoms, and that which had once haunted the foe now marched at their side.
Even death remembers betrayal.
Within the sanctum, Gula knelt beside the wounded gods and angels, her hands ablaze with radiance as she poured healing into their broken forms. Zababa stood sentinel, steadfast and unyielding. Yet suddenly the walls quaked, and beyond them a tide of corrupted power thundered against the gates. The heavens blazed crimson, the earth split beneath their feet, and the spirits screamed with a voice that shook creation. The fifth wall, once forged to men, now lay encircled by ruin. Gula cradled a dying warrior in her arms. Her light faltered, trembling like the last ember of a sacred fire. Lifting her gaze, she sought Zababa, as if the fate of gods themselves hung upon his strength.
It's too much. There are too many. We hold. We protect. That is our oath.
A fresh quake rent the floor asunder, and the outer halls thundered with screams. The wounded began to wither, not by their wounds, but by the unraveling of the world itself. The battlefield no longer yielded to healing, it demanded only survival. Gula lowered her hands, and her sacred light waned into shadow.
What is healing when there's no one left to save?
Zababa, his eyes burning with rage, struck his weapon into the earth, not as a shield of war, but as a cry of grief before the heavens. From the abyss, Tiamat beheld the ruin. The first four layers lay broken, and the fifth wavered like the last ember of a fallen star.
One layer remains.
Behind her, the legions had roared as one. The gods had not yet fallen, yet their wounds bled unceasingly. Light, storm, stone, and spirit lay undone. And what awaited beyond was the heart itself, the gods in their very essence. Smoke had coiled above the shattered spires of the divine realm. The battlefield had fallen silent. The ruins were steeped in lightless blood and trembling shadows. The last radiance of the gods had withered beneath a sky blackened by betrayal and war. Once a beacon of harmony, the divine realm now lingered at the precipice of annihilation. At the heart of the desolation, Marduk had stood upon the final steps of his palace, unmoving, robed in ash and fading light, encircled by a dwindling host of divine defenders. Tiamat had led the charge, her boundless form wreathed in smoke and wrath. Enlil had followed, thunder burning within his eyes. Ishtar had strode forth like a flame of vengeance, her blade poised for ruin. And behind them had come Uthrog, Drakara, and Gorgon, shadows of dread trailing in their wake.
It ends here, Marduk. Your light, your realm, your name, all will burn.
We will strike you from the song of creation.
And from your ashes, a new world will rise, one written in blood.
Marduk had lifted his eyes, and his voice had flowed forth soft, still, and unshaken, as though eternity itself had spoken through him.
You've torn down the walls. You've walked through the storm, but you've forgotten what lives in the flame. You came for death. Let me show you how it feels.
Marduk had lifted his hand, and the heavens had torn asunder above him. From the depths of the shattered divine palace, there had erupted a blazing sphere of black fire. The dark flame blazed, roaring like the last cry of a dying star. Born of the first spark of divine collision in Marduk's war against Tiamat, Ishtar, and Enlil, the flame had remembered all. It had not been mere fire, but memory made flesh. Every betrayal, every scream, every clash of steel had been carved into its searing heart. It had burned with will, and now it had awakened. The flame had howled across the battlefield, and the earth had quaked beneath its endless hunger. Ishtar had turned, her eyes wide in dread, but too late. The flame had descended upon her, striking with the fury of forgotten gods.
What is this?
The fire had struck. Her radiant armor had melted into molten streams, and her flesh had shattered into fissures of light. Her eyes had burst forth in blinding fire, and she had screamed, not in terror, but in disbelief, as the truth of her undoing was seared into eternity.
This wasn't fate. I was fate!
Her body had writhed in midair, consumed from within by the devouring flame. Her scream had carried across the desolate miles, a dirge of defiance and despair. Then silence had fallen, vast and absolute. Nothing endured save the drifting ash, falling like cursed snow upon the broken earth. Uthrog had charged forth, roaring like a thunderclap, yet the fire had swept through him, and his body of stone had shattered, crumbling into dust upon the wind. Drakara had risen to the heavens, his wings ablaze, striving to flee the inferno, but the flame had caught him in mid-flight, his wings disintegrated, and his form had plummeted like a falling star, vanishing in a searing flash. Gorgon had snarled, raking the earth with desperate claws, seeking to burrow into the depths. Yet the fire had torn through soil and shadow alike, consuming him utterly. His final utterance had been a guttural choke, swallowed and silenced by the eternal flame. And so the Titans had fallen, not by combat, but by a fire that no strength could withstand. Tiamat had recoiled, her vast burning coils winding about the blast to shield her mortal flesh. Yet Enlil had been caught at the edge of the inferno. His storm-forged armor had melted to nothing, and his body had smoldered, bleeding forth a terrible light.
What have you done?
You kept this hidden. That flame is not of this world.
The battlefield lay in silence. Ash had drifted downward like a cursed snow. Marduk had lowered his hand, and upon his face there lingered the weariness of ages, weathered, eternal, and infinite.
This was never vengeance, only balance.
The ruins still smoldered, their breath rising in fading embers. The fire waned to a dying glow, and the gods who had endured sank to their knees. The tide had turned, yet the cost was beyond measure. In the end, fire had done what no wall could achieve. It had not defended, it had cleansed. The battlefield lay scorched, veiled in waves of smoke. Ash drifted across the shattered marble and fallen towers, while on the horizon the dark flame still lingered, defiant as a dying sun. At the center, Tiamat lay broken, her blackened scales steaming, her vast coils quivering with the burden of breath. The silence was broken only by the crackle of fading fire and the ragged exhalation of a goddess who would not yield. The blaze had struck, and with it, the dream of chaos was consumed. She raised her head, flesh seared and peeling where the fire had bitten, and her eyes glowed with agony transfigured into wrath.
He knew! He knew! He waited for us to rise, only to burn us as we touch the sky.
Enlil emerged, limping into the ruin. His once mighty frame lay broken, his form fissured and veiled in smoke. The storm that had crowned him was no more, and his trembling hands bore witness to a power undone.
Tiamat, we must go. The fire, it's not just destruction, it's something else.
Marduk had risen in the distance, his form vast and unyielding. Around his hands the flames had gathered, weaving a scepter of judgment and fire. He did not advance, nor did he falter, for his triumph was already sealed. Yet his power did not trespass beyond its bound, for the fire obeyed the ancient law. The cosmos itself, even in its fury, had remembered the covenant of balance.